Broadcasting from the Any Hour Services podcast studios, I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and you're listening to In the House. In the House is a podcast about the major systems in the house. Electrical, plumbing, heating, air conditioning. Each week, I'm joined by a panel of experts. We pick a topic and we discuss it in depth. It's meant to be informative, and hopefully bring you some value. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of cabling your sewer line. Or otherwise known as rootering, some people call it that. But the sewer main line is that main pipe that goes from the house to the city. If you ever have multiple drains backing up, especially if it's in a basement or a lower level of the home, chances are you're having an issue with your sewer main line. What usually happens is we call a plumber or a drain company. They come out and they cable the line. Then once the water has gone away, as a homeowner, we think the issue is resolved, but that might not be the case. And we're going to talk about that on the show today. Today, I'm joined by Matt, Jesse, and Chasen. They are the management team of the Drains and Sewer Department at Any Hour Services. These guys specialize in all things drains. Boom. Welcome back, guys.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So let's actually just start at the beginning. Why would someone need to cable their sewer main line?
Well, the biggest reason is because obviously it's clogged.
Okay.
Something's happening that is not letting the water go down the line like it's supposed to. And usually that manifests with water coming up somewhere it's not supposed to, usually going to be the lowest point in the house, a floor drain or something like that. There's a lot of different things that cause those clogs to happen. And that's really the main issue is why is it clogging? And so there's things that can go wrong in those old pipes, even in new pipes, but it's bellies where it's lost the slope, it's sagging. Or roots have found their way into the line, or there's joints that have offset. There's several different things that can cause it, but every one of those is basically a failure of the system. And so the cable that you put in there serves one purpose, and that's to make the water go down. It's not going to fix anything or anything like that. It just makes water go down. So people do it because they're seeing water where they're not supposed to, and it's not going down the line like it is supposed to.
So what does cabling accomplish?
Cabling really doesn't do much. The biggest goal with running a cable through there is poke a hole through whatever's making it back up and get that water to go down. So you think about a 4-inch pipe. It's a pretty good sized pipe. It's the largest one in the home. Even the bottom of the toilet's only 2 inches. So anything that can get through those drains should have zero problem running through that bigger pipe. And so when you run a cable through one that's clogged, the cable is also about 2 inches going into a 4-inch pipe, and it pokes a small hole in whatever's causing that blockage so that the water will go down. Now, 99% of the time, that's temporary. The water only goes down for a short time until whatever made it clog becomes an issue again. Most commonly, it's roots, which the misconception with roots is that they cause the problem. Really, all roots do is exacerbate an existing problem, which is that something's open. Usually it's a joint that has failed and it's letting water out, and roots from a tree are always looking for water. So when they find a little bit of water trickling out of this pipe they didn't know was there, they follow it right back into that pipe.
So if cabling doesn't really accomplish that much except letting the water down, why do we do it?
Well, the biggest reason is because in order to figure out what needs to happen to actually fix that pipe, we've got to be able to see it. And when it's got the water in it, currently you're blind in there with we have cameras that we can put into these pipes that actually get eyes on the problem, find out what's making it back up, where it is, tons of different details we can get from those, but they don't work very well if there's water in the line. And so you can't see anything, it throws the location off, things like that. And so 2 reasons: one, so we can see what's going on, and 2, to get the water out of the house. Yeah, because even if we can get it to go down temporarily, that at least alleviates the immediate, it's flooding right now, so that we have the time we need to get to fixing the problem.
And, we've talked about this before offline, but for a homeowner, when they've got a backup or they're having a blockage, in their mind, the problem is I've got water where it shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. And when we go in and we poke a hole through it or cable it and the water goes away, in their mind, they're like, oh, it's fixed. But, that's not necessarily the case. So
more often than not, it's not. Mm-hmm. Fixed is an exaggeration.
Okay.
In those cases, yes.
So talk to me more about that then. Like how do you take a homeowner that their stress has been alleviated because the water's gone, and talk to them about what the root cause, not pun intended, actually, what the main cause of that backup was. So walk me through how you talk to somebody about, educating them, because that's what we do when we go out. A big part of this job when we go out to people's homes is actually educating them on how their homes work and the systems in their home work. And, we've mentioned before that you don't really see your sewer main line, and you don't really know that it's there. I mean, you know that it's there, but you're not really thinking about it until there's an issue and it's not doing what it's supposed to. So, talk to me about that.
Well, and that's the whole benefit to a sewer line, is you're not supposed to have to think about it. And so what we see a lot of times is people who have had this issue, every time they flush the toilet, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, man, did that just come up in the basement? And so when you're standing there and you got a pool of water where there's not supposed to be one, the problem in a homeowner's mind is, why is there water here? The problem in a technician's mind is, why is there not water going where it's supposed to be going? And so it's just that simple change in thought process makes you go, okay, so the water's here is only a symptom. The real problem is, why is it not going anywhere else? And so when you've got a little bit of water you're looking at and you get the water to go down, the big thing is you want to make sure it's not going to happen again. And so, nobody wants sewage in their basement. Nobody I know wants sewage in their basement. And so even if you can get the water to go down temporarily, it's going to come back unless you do something about it.
I think the people that have had a backup, a significant enough one that where they had to replace their main line, they probably understand what we're talking about. But let's assume that there are people listening right now that haven't ever really thought about, that sewer main line, what it's made of, why it was getting cabled, and they've never had to deal with that type of thing. So let's actually educate them on, what to watch for, why it's an issue, so that they can be proactive and not have to have a flooded basement.
You guys want me to keep talking? I love hearing
it. It is
myself.
The Chasen Show, and we can tell you like to hear yourself talk.
I do.
Well,
you've got a great voice for it.
He really does.
Thanks, guys.
If you want to go off how you just said that, what to watch for and why it would happen, the things that we discuss with homeowners on what to watch for is just anything acting as it normally wouldn't. So like a toilet moving really slow, or finding, disgusting black discolored water in a tub or something when you're using the drains, or you go downstairs like we've talked before and you find 2 to 3 feet of pooled up water around a floor drain, right?
2 to 3 feet?
In diameter.
Oh, gotcha.
Yep.
I'm thinking like, whoa, that's deep.
You're
going to notice that one.
Yeah, good correction. Yeah, you'll find it when you hit the bottom of the stairs. But so those kinds of things. But those kinds of things have already happened, and that would be the reason for us, or a service tech going out there. Then when you talk about why they happen, is exactly like Chasen said, is not exactly the root issue. It's you have an opening or a malfunction in the sewer line that's supposed to take the sewage and the water out, and something has penetrated that or become an obstruction, which has allowed the water to come back. And so if we don't have the water clear, we can't see and identify that. So the idea is to clear that, and then as we clear it, we can identify it, and then we'd go into the education process or talk to them about that, whether it's roots, foreign object, break, collapse, no grade, a whole bunch of other things, which we could talk about those too. But though that's kind of, the why they've already called us about. Most people already know, but that, or what to watch for, that's what you would watch for, and why could be several different things.
Yeah, and like Jesse said, with the water not going where it's supposed to go, that's what you're watching for. Is if you run water over here and then it shows up over somewhere else, usually low. If you have a basement, it'll show up. If it is a sewer line backing up, it'll show up in the basement at the lowest point. Anytime a drain backs up, you're going to see that backup happen from the lowest point of whatever part of the system's backing up. Water's going to take the path of least resistance every time. And gravity, which is awesome when it comes to sewer lines, that's what they rely on entirely. Gravity makes it so that water always stays perfectly level. So as that pipe fills up, with things staying level, it's going to show up at the lowest point as it comes up the line. And so it's going to be the floor drain that's near the water heater in the furnace. It's going to be, if there's not a floor drain there, or the floor drain doesn't work for some reason, a bathtub in the basement, or whatever drain is the next lowest point. If you flush the toilet upstairs and it shows up somewhere downstairs, you're dealing with something in your sewer line.
Well, and the only thing I'd add is these are the most common sewer lines, and the most common sewer line that we see in this area, it leaves your home and it goes to a sewer connection, which is a larger main, anywhere from 8-inch to 42-inch. And that's
the city's
main, and it carries it to the treatment plant. But there are other systems that we see out there. Septic tanks are still out there. And so if you're talking maintaining a septic tank, it's totally different. That's a whole other show on its own. But I want to make sure people understand that there are pumps still being used every day out there. Not as many as the typical traditional sewer line, but there are pumps that homes don't have the grade. And so they get flow into a pump that pumps it and injects it into the sewer main. That's a whole other topic too on maintenance in that. So
if you have a septic tank, this episode is not about that. If you've got pumps in the system to get the waste out, this episode is not about that. We're mainly talking about gravity fed main line connecting to the city. And you've mentioned before that a lot of people might not realize that you're actually responsible for everything from the city's connection back to the house. So some people think that that thing that connects from my house out to the city's connection, that's their responsibility. But if it's on your property, that's your responsibility, right?
Yeah, in most cases, you're totally right. And that connection can be anywhere. It could be on your side of the road. It might be on the other side of the road, and you're responsible all the way across the road. In most cases, it's somewhere near the middle of the road. And this goes state by state and even sewer district by sewer district, but most of the time homeowners are responsible all the way to that connection, which means if there's something that needs to happen underneath the road, homeowners are responsible for paying for that road damage and things like that.
So let's kind of bring us back. So we've kind of laid a foundation of some things, but the episode, we're talking about the pros and cons of cabling the line. So it's obviously the first step usually when you've got water in the line, because you want to expose whatever the problem is so that you can get a camera down and see it. But let's talk about, so that's a pro. Mm-hmm. You're getting the water gone and you're draining the pipe so you can get another tool down there that's specialized in seeing where the problem is and locating where that is. Let's talk about some of the cons, the negatives of cabling.
The only thing I want to add to the pro before we leave that topic, cables definitely have a place. If Jason was talking about the toilet everything being a 2-inch diameter going into a 4-inch diameter on the main, a very small chance that you are able to, if someone pulls a toilet off, a kid drops a toy down that line, it wedges itself into something. A cable, awesome. It most of the time can either break it loose, push it down to the main, maybe even put a snag hook on it, pull it back. So any kind of object that gets put in the main that doesn't belong there, cable's great for it. That's one of the things I wanted to touch on, because they definitely have their place there, but to do it as a maintenance is definitely not that.
And to add to what you're saying, I would say that if you have gotten to the point that you had to have your line cabled and you don't know why the thing backed up, it's always best to then have the thing cameraed.
100%.
Like they make tools where you can send a high definition camera down the line. It's got LED lights in it where it illuminates everything that's going on, so you can actually see what the problem is. And if you don't know that someone dropped something down the drain and you're not sure why it backed up, it's always, is it a pretty common practice that drain companies, that if let me go back, especially if your system is older, but is it a pretty common practice that they will offer a camera if you had some type of blockage and you go out and you clear it? Will they usually offer that camera as part of the service, or do they charge extra for that?
So most companies will charge extra, and it's, in a lot of cases it's a different technician coming out. It's very expensive equipment, and so most companies will charge extra. Now, some companies that are actually trying to solve problems and help people get these things out of their lives are a little more inclined to not nickel and dime you through that whole process and just try and help you get to the root of the problem and get the real solution figured out. So it all depends on who you're working with. That's why it's so important to find somebody you trust and make sure their process lines up with what your goals are.
Is that a question that someone should ask on the phone? Like if they know, like, hey, I got to get this thing cabled, I don't know why. Is it okay for them to ask that question to the company and be like, hey, once you guys clear this, are you willing to camera it? And ask those questions? It's
always a good question. Yeah, there's no such thing as a bad question when you're trying to figure out what's going on with your home. The biggest thing is making sure that answer is one you trust. And anybody who is throwing answers around without really knowing exactly what's going on and being there on site and kind of evaluating what's happening, people throwing answers around to questions like that are sometimes a little bit scary. You want to make sure somebody's actually out there to find out a little bit more, see if it really is something you need, because a lot of times it's not as big an issue as you may think, and the camera may not be necessary. Maybe it's not the sewer line backing up. Maybe it's something different and manifests in a similar way. And so it is good to ask, do you guys have cameras if we need it? And make sure that they're a company that has the ability to take you through the whole process.
Gotcha.
There's still companies out there that just cable. I mean, cables started being used when they started having problems because that was the tool they had. And so that's why people think that's the fix. But there are companies that still just cable it, and they charge what they need to make it worth them to cable it. And so for a lot of times that's their bread and butter is cable it. And
seems like if you're in the business of just cabling lines and you're not trying to fix them, that's
you don't
that's
want
job
not
security.
Cable
Yeah, you want it to back up again. Yep.
Well, okay. So, any more pros about the cable before we go into some of the cons about why the cons of cabling?
That's really about it. But hey, before we dive into cons, can I make a shout out?
Yeah.
Our technician Tyler just sent me a picture of their baby that was born minutes ago.
Really?
Yeah. Congratulations, Tyler.
Hey, way to go,
Nice job,
man.
Tyler.
What
for
number
you.
child is that for?
This is now you're putting me on the spot. I'm pretty sure this is number
mess it
3.
up.
I hope this is number 3.
He'll let you know if it's not.
will. He
I know he
will.
listens to the show.
He does.
so.
He does. He's gotten a lot from it. But cons are numerous. One is, again, with roots being the most common thing, you think about a bouquet of roses. You take your wife bouquet of roses. She brings you a bouquet, however you guys do it. And the first thing you do is you cut the bottom.
Another analogy that I can't relate to.
Okay. You're not a rose guy. I get it.
Well, no, funny story. I always have to put my wife on blast for this. So one year, I was driving around and I heard one of those like flower commercials like on the radio. Mm-hmm. And being the guy that this is targeted to, I had forgotten or hadn't taken the time to do whatever holiday was coming up. I don't even remember the holiday. What I do remember is that I ordered the flowers.
Smart.
My wife saw the charge come through on the credit card and went and canceled the order.
What?
She was upset.
What? How dare you buy flowers?
I've never bought her flowers since. So joke's on her.
We got a lot
I
of
would probably
silly
be
deal for
guessing
me.
since it never happened before. She was sure it was fraud.
I had gotten flowers before, and here's the thing: if you talk to her about it, she's got her reasons why, and it was something about like I would rather you like go and buy cheaper flowers at Costco, and I was like, I wasn't going by Costco. I was trying to make a gesture of love.
My wife says they're just going to die anyway. Buy me some food or something. But then I get in trouble if I don't buy flowers. So
Anyway, I derailed that because you made a
we can come
comment
back
about flowers.
Well, we're still on topic. We're talking about flowers still. So the first thing you do
Why
when
don't
you do
guys
get that
on
bouquet,
edible arrangements?
Ooh, we'll come back to that.
So they're pretty and you can eat them. There you go.
Edible Arrangements is not a sponsor of the show. If you'd like to be, get
That
at
is
me,
true.
mike.wilson@anyhourservices.com. We are taking sponsors. But again, my wife doesn't do chocolate dipped fruit.
You don't have to be chocolate dipped fruit. It could just be regular
You're
fresh cut
chocolate
fruit.
dipped fruit.
I've seen
I
her
love
just
some
watermelon.
chocolate dipped fruit, and I am chocolate
I like
dipped
chocolate
fruit.
dipped strawberries.
So
We've just had a breakthrough. So
What were you trying to talk about, Jason?
flowers, we're still there. So first thing you do, you get a bouquet of roses, you put the water in, you put the little food packet, and then you cut the bottom off the stem of roses so that it can absorb those nutrients.
Yep.
When we run an auger through a line and cut those roots off, we've done the exact same thing. And so those roots are going to be able to more actively absorb the nutrients that you're putting into it by using your sewer line. And they grow back faster. They grow back stronger. And so people who...
I see where you're going now with that. That makes a lot of sense.
we got there now.
it's a rich environment. Regardless of what you're
the
putting down there,
packet,
there's a lot of
it's
water
healthy.
going
The
down the
packet
line.
you dump in the water is very similar to the same things you flush down the toilet. It is like the fertilizer of all roots. That's the truth of
It's
it.
perfect.
Okay.
And
That's
so
why they
it's-
come back bigger and stronger every year.
It's the environment they've been dying to find, and they found it right there in your front yard. And so they grow back faster and stronger. So people who don't fix it on the first one, what we see is okay, I got a little while till the next one. And then we find that gap between backups get shorter and shorter and shorter as those roots get stronger and faster.
And that's a question we ask a lot is how long you've been doing this. So I've done it once in 3 years. Then you run into the customer or the person who's done it. Well, I do it once every month. Okay, your roots are strong and they're coming back fast. You got no time or limited time before something happens. And so, and that is exactly how how it plays out. You hit your first one, or it happens to you one time and it becomes roots, and then depending on the tree or the shrubs you have, they'll come back 6 months, maybe a year later, or they'll start showing up every 3 months because they're just coming back stronger and faster. And it might be an aggressive tree, it may not be an aggressive tree. It just depends on what you planted or even what the city planted in the right of way. But you're responsible either way.
One of the questions we hear a lot are the yards that don't have a tree in the front yard. Well, what tree's putting those roots in there? Mm-hmm. And the real thing is, all we know is there are roots. We really don't know where they're coming from.
I've seen 2 neighbors down the street.
It could be. It could be crabgrass. I've seen crabgrass go 9 feet down and crush a pipe. Certain grasses shoot super deep roots, and especially depending on where you live. Here in Utah, we live in the desert, and so plants go deep to find water.
I think the biggest thing is roots aren't causing the water to come out of the pipe.
Right.
They just found the water. Mm-hmm. You've had someone has dug the trench and put it back, even if it's been 40, 30 years, that soil is still softer than the soil that was never dug up, which the roots are automatically going to go towards. And then you add water that's automatically going to go to the softer soil in the first place, and it's going to go to the bottom of that trench. And then there's a pipe there with a hole in it. Holy cow.
Well, I think another con with cables is that a lot of times if you've got an opening like you described where either roots are coming in or debris is like falling in, or maybe the pipe is collapsing on itself, is that when you put a cable down that line, it's a big metal cable, 2-inch head on it, and it's like whipping around really fast. And if there is extra pressure or cracks or things, it's possible that you are causing more damage if you just continue cabling over and over and over again. But anyway.
Well, and another huge con is the expense. Every time you have somebody come out and run a cable, you're paying for that to happen, which the inevitable fact is, unfortunately, you're going to end up repairing or replacing that line. So every time you've paid to cable it, you're just making it more expensive to get to the end line that you're going to get to at some point anyway.
Now, we've talked about this before. Another reason that people cable the line so frequently is because the repair options used to not be ideal, right? So talk to me about what you used to have to do to repair it and what has changed and why cabling doesn't have to be your option anymore.
Anytime we talk about the history of anything, I defer to the senior citizen in our group. So Matt,
yes, we are all son of people younger than you.
So
you could be our father.
A whole person could have lived a life between you and me. So why don't you tell us about the history of digging?
Well, starting from
as far as the history, the tools that have
after the flood, what happened?
The things that have changed the sewer line industry is starting with the camera. I mean, we've had cameras in underground utilities for 30 years. It's just they thought they were really cool being able to make a camera the size of a football and making it move. That still is pretty cool. Yeah. But so they could get a camera, have a cord on the back of it, be able to drive it. They couldn't really control right or left. They could just make it go forward and then pull it back with the cable, but they could still.
Kind of like the first remote control cars.
Yeah,
just like that.
Or the cheap ones that you get
still today. Yes.
Backwards, forwards.
So when they started doing that in the bigger pipelines, and they could see what's going on, and they would see that some of these joints have got roots coming in, the offsets, and where they needed to update the lines. And cities are kind of the ones that started updating their systems because it's cheaper to. When I say update, they could line or burst instead of digging up the whole road. There were other options, and they could see it with their camera, and they knew what they could do. Now, the hard part was with it being such a small line, a 4-inch diameter, they didn't have anything that they could put in a 4-inch line. So we, on homes, have still been cabling and knocking the roots down, and that was our means. We'd poke a hole in it, it would drain down. We'd go as long as we could, poke another hole in it, and people started thinking of that as maintaining their sewer line, like it was something that needed to be done. And
The truth was it was the only thing that could really be done. So.
Yeah, and it's like blowing air into a raft with a hole in it and just keep blowing more air. Runs out, blow more air.
Unfortunately, when the cable didn't work and then they had to dig it up, they really had no idea where it was at because the camera wasn't there yet to, one, be able to see it and locate it. Other locating devices they had weren't very accurate at all. We used to, it might sound bad, there's a little locating beacon we would put on fishing line, flush down a toilet, and see the footage on it and try to see where it was at and then go out and try to locate it. Other ways we'd use dye. We'd put dye down the toilets and we'd go to manholes to see, is it coming through or is it completely broke off? And so these are like the ways we had to do it before. You could just put a camera in it and see what's going on. Not only see what's going on, but you could locate it and see exactly where it's at and the depth of it. And so the camera is really what changed it. But then even before the camera, when they had to do a replacement because the cable didn't work, the equipment was a lot bigger. They didn't know where it was at, and so they would dig the entire front yard up looking for it, or half of it, best case scenario, and then they would find it, and then they would start chasing it to find the problem of where the blockage is that the cable couldn't get through. Then when they're all said and done, their whole yard is destroyed. They've not only got the expense of the equipment and the labor and the materials, but now they've got to re-landscape their whole yard. And so most people seen that, and it spread quickly. Like, the cable is the way to go. If you can cable it, that's the best thing to do because you'll destroy your home, you know. But with the camera, where we could pinpoint it and dig exactly where the problem is and know where it is, there's a lot less problems with landscaping. We can find it. And then the other thing we've come up with is using things to protect the grass, like plywood and plates and things where we can throw the spoil pile on it. And then when we're done, we pull it off, and man, that grass looks perfect when you're done. And so you'd have a little 8x8 spot missing grass, and that was the extent of some of the repairs. Then some other bigger things that came up were lining. Lining, and with a liner, you can dig down from one axis and blow a resin-soaked sock down a line, which then you inflate with another calibration tube, which hardens up, and it's a PVC liner inside the pipe where it seals off all the roots, and you could do that from one point to the whole line. Bursting is another one, but you would need two access points, but you would pull a big metal head with cutters on it that hooks to a pipe, and it pulls a new pipe in behind it. So those are some of the things that have really streamlined these replacements, because the pipes that were used, they're just like everything else. They have a age that they last to, and most of them are anywhere, 30 to 20 to 30 years, 20 to 50?
Yeah, cast iron, clay, 30-ish to 40-ish. Yeah.
And that really depends on what you're putting down it too. It can not even make it that long if somebody's putting some aggressive chemicals or things down there they're not supposed to. Or if all they ever do is run water and throw everything in the trash can, you might get a little bit longer than that. But 30 to 40 years is where you start to see some real wear and tear and maintenance starting to show up.
I'm not a roofer, Mike, but you on just a normal asphalt shingle roof, how long do those last? Do you know?
I don't.
There's probably a podcast about roofing if you were a roofer, but
I don't know how long they last.
Do
you know how long they last?
No, I've seen some that are up to 25 years. I think metal roofs go a little bit longer, but I think asphalt shingles are somewhere around 25. Who's got their phone handy? Why don't you Google that?
Yeah, all right.
See what the lifespan on that.
I'll get back to you.
I'm guessing 25 years. What are you guessing?
I'm not.
You're not going to guess anything at all. You're just like totally gun shy away from roofing.
When it comes to analogies, it's possible that I would, say the wrong thing, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I think a roof lasts.
Good thing we have a millennial here. He's really quick with the phone.
Here's the thing.
Just barely. I'm only 1 year into that.
Here's how long a roof lasts. It lasts until it goes bad.
How do you know it's bad?
That's the chicken answer.
Google tells me.
Well, Google tells me right now that most asphalt shingles should go about 25 years.
Oh,
Whoa,
man.
it's almost
You must
like
be a roofer.
You Googled this before we started.
No.
It does seem that way. The tone
Maybe
of your
it's
voice
the years that I've been
sounds
alive.
different.
I knew this. I don't know.
Oh, how many roofs have you gone through?
Several.
4 or 5? 6?
I've re-roofed a few houses of mine.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
But why'd you re-roof them?
because there was water coming
Okay,
into
so
my home.
so people aren't quite understanding what's going on here. So get to where you're going.
Do that. I'm not
Get to
doing
where
it.
you're going.
No, Jason, go ahead.
All right, Mike. Let's say you have an older roof and
Okay.
you see a leak start to form, and you're getting
I'm
water
replacing
on the
that
ceiling.
bad boy.
Right.
I'm like, get me a roofer out here and
Get
give me
someone
a
out
new
here.
roof.
Let's fix this for real.
No, okay. So your question. Okay, I got a leaky roof.
Yeah. So
And
so
the
and
thoughts
that's
that
exactly
go through
it.
my head. How old is the roof and why is it leaking?
Yeah, what's happening with it? What's going wrong? Why is it leaking? Things like that. How am I going to make sure it's never going to leak again? That's really the end point. And the big thing is that that's something you can see. When you buy a house, you know one day you're going to put a new roof on it. One day you're going to put a new furnace in it. The one thing we don't think about is the part that we can't see, the sewer line. Out of sight, out of mind. And it's supposed to be out of sight, out of mind. If it is something you have to think about, it's because something's happened and now you've seen a problem. When you have a leak in your roof, you see it every day. It's damaging things. It's hurting your house even more than just the leak itself. And so you fix it. You don't want it leaking. For some reason, sewer lines have taken a different turn, and people decide sometimes not to fix it and just let the roof keep leaking. And it causes more and more problems, more and more damage. Every time it backs up, it's damaging the floor. It's damaging whatever that water touches. Just for sake of how important it is for that water, the laws require if a remediation company gets involved and comes and help, drywall that gets wet has to be cut 2 feet above the water line, just to make sure there's no contaminants left behind. And so it's a huge problem to have sewage in your house, but because it's not something you can see every time it rains, people tend to neglect it.
And that particular code or whatever Jason's talking about, taking the sheetrock up to get the contaminants out, that comes from way back when indoor plumbing was even designed or made possible for people. Indoor plumbing is considered top 5 best technology ever in our lifetime. And the reason is when it came out and you were able to channel or get your bad waste or that dirty water or that contaminants out of the home, deaths in the home that were related to disease or illness or breathing in the wrong kind of air actually decreased by 50% to when we were able to catch that kind of water, that kind of wastewater, and push it out of the home and treat it down the line somewhere.
For sure.
My favorite.
I think the biggest thing to kind of tie things together with that roof and everything else is, if anything in your home, anything in your home was leaking, you would fix it. You're not going to let it leak. You're not going to let your water lines leak. You're not going to let your water heater leak. Even if your furnace is leaking water where it should be draining into the floor drain, you're going to make sure it gets to the right place. The sewer line's no different. We've known before cameras that if we're cabling it and we're pulling back roots, it's leaking. And we've just kind of got to the point where we just ignore that. And water is the most powerful thing out there, and it destroys pretty much everything. You look at all the canyons that are made, and you look at the dams that have been destroyed from not installed right. Water is like the power of all. Everyone's been fighting over power or water forever because of the power water has. When you have something leaking, it doesn't change it, even if it's underground, because it's one, attracting roots that are destroying your line. 2, it's washing the dirt out from underneath your pipe, which is going to cause those bellies and those offsets. And so for some reason, people have justified that everything in your home should not leak unless it's your sewer line. It doesn't really make any sense, does it? So,
yeah, well, and to that point, we had a job a couple of years ago, not the one in Tooele, that's not where I'm going, but that was a hole in the sewer line underneath the home. So it was underneath the slab and under the basement. And when we put a camera in there, all we could see was this hole where water was escaping. That's the one limitation of the cameras, is you can't see what damage is occurring outside of that pipe. And so we ended up, that customer wanted to fix it, and so we ended up jackhammering the concrete to get down to that pipe. And when we got through the concrete, what we found was a 5-foot abscess underneath, where that leak had been washing the dirt away from that pipe and even carrying some of it down or compacting underneath. And so I'm not going to say how long that could have gone on before concrete collapsed, but if that gets big enough, you do. And it's a big, scary thing. It doesn't happen very often, but it can cause such a big hole that things can begin to collapse, including your floor.
Well, so what does, I mean, I guess that's the thing is like, I think the biggest thing that keeps people from repairing it or replacing it is that the cost really, and not really the cost, because it's not that it's expensive and it shouldn't be
Not
that
just
expensive.
the dollar amount, but the process.
It's the unexpected. Like no one knows when that's going to happen. They're not planning it. We're as Americans or maybe as humans, I don't know, we're not terribly great at like, saving for those types of emergencies, which we try and save, and we call ourselves doing a good job if we're saving for a vacation. But then all of a sudden you have an emergency pop up and you got to replace a sewer line. Sorry, kids, no Mickey Mouse. But hey, you can flush that toilet as much as you want.
I've had many people say, well, I guess we're getting flushing toilets for Christmas this year.
Right.
Yeah, we've had that a lot.
I mean, they do have financing options available and things. And I love the trenchless technology where you can replace those. But the biggest thing is, try and watch for those early warning signs before it gets to the point where you have a big backup. And even if you see the early warning signs, like don't wait to start saving money. It's a good idea to be putting some money aside as a house emergency fund, because water heaters go out, furnaces go out, sewer lines go out, and things just kind of break down. And as much as you try to maintain them, it does get to the point where things have to be replaced and installed new.
Well, and you just made me think of 2 points. One of those being the expense, and that's without fixing it and letting it back up. That expense is only getting higher and higher, not only because you're paying to cable it, like I mentioned earlier, but every time it backs up, it's damaging something. We've been to many homes where they repair the basement because sewer water got around, and they get new drywall, new floors, new everything, and then it happens again because they didn't fix the problem, and they end up doing it all again and making it more expensive.
I was just going to say with that, if you've got keepsakes that can't be replaced, we've come across a handful of those, and that's super sad. That's hard to watch when we know that we knew about it and we had to watch those things get lost. So just like Chase was said, the cost only gets deeper when you're trying to skip around it.
I might be a control freak, and this.
You are.
He is.
Okay. Well, I wasn't worried about the pictures or anything. My thing is, like, if I have a problem, I want to control when I'm doing it. You put it off, it's gonna catch up with you sooner or later. The only thing is, it's gonna happen, and typically what we see is it's a full collapsed pipe, and you have no choice but to dig. And you know how everything always happens. It's either a holiday or a weekend, or that's when those things happen, in the middle of the night.
Murphy's Law.
That's just the way it works. And then people are in a panic, and it has to be done now. You don't get a plan when this is going on. You don't have the option of a lot of the trenchless things. And so my advice is, if you've got water leaving any pipe, you need to get it sealed up. You need to get it fixed. It's only going to get worse. And so the best signs we have are a cable pulling back something, and you need to get a camera in to get it looked at.
Well, and that makes me think of the other point I had a second ago, was that what we've seen with people who continually cable these lines, and like I mentioned earlier, that gap gets smaller and smaller between cablings. Eventually, whatever's causing those backups is going to crush that pipe. And so like Matt says, you can replace it on your own terms. As soon as you know there's a problem, you can solve it, or you can wait until that pipe forces your hand, and then you're still going to be unprepared, and you're still going to be having a big problem that has now become even harder to fix because you can't do liners and things on the pipes that have collapsed most of the time.
You can roll the dice, but the house always wins.
The house, or in this case, it loses.
Well, no, the house won. You lost.
The sewer line won. The house got damaged.
I've always thought
the house got repaired because it wanted to. I'm
flooded.
Sorry, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I was trying to make a Vegas
it was good.
Yeah. I thought I was doing good, and then
yeah.
You were like, no.
What? Let me tie into that point. Is
Do it.
If you know that you
Quickly.
have that point, have that
Sucks
problem.
when analogies don't land, doesn't it?
It's the pits.
Woo!
They have pit bosses, in Vegas.
Pitted
Thank
pipes.
you.
Pitted pipes. Yeah.
That's not where I was going, but
That's where I'm
pitted
always
faces, whatever.
Pits.
Yep.
It's the pits.
They stink. But what I was saying is, if you know you got these issues and you're trying to, we've seen a lot of people who will cable their line because the holidays are coming up and they're hosting. That actually doesn't do you a whole lot of good because you're putting a lot of extra pressure on an already weak problem, and the cable really is not going to help you there. It's going to come back at the most unwanted time, and it's usually when hosting. And we actually find a major increase around the holidays where people are hosting 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and that's where you get forced. I got family here. It needs to be fixed. Yep.
And to add to that, to go back to one of your earlier questions about what the cable accomplishes, one of the things it does not accomplish is preventing a backup.
Right.
They're made to clear an existing backup. And so if you're running one, a lot of people call in and say, hey, I just do this every few months to make sure I don't back up. That's a waste. It doesn't do any good unless there's a current blockage for it to break apart. Running a cable through a line that, even if it has roots in it, those roots are just swinging around and they're like a trap door, and that cable's pretty rigid. And so you push it, and if they're not held on tight and actually causing a blockage, they just swing out of the way and then swing right back when you get that cable out of the way. So it really doesn't accomplish anything as a maintenance or preventative standpoint.
The other thing, you're sending a metal rod, mechanical, going down your pipe with a cutting tool on the end of it. It causes more damage to your existing system than it does good. Mm-hmm. The only time you should use it is if you are totally backed up.
Yeah, it's a tool of necessity.
Hey, I thought of something. We got all this stuff up on top of the table here, all these different trades. And plumbing obviously is one of the coolest trades. I'm looking at the kind of the air ferries behind us with the furnace there, and then we've got the electrical, what do we call it?
I don't really even know. I don't really even know where to go.
But any of those trades, like without plumbing, and you can't flush your toilet without somewhere to go, you're back in the Stone Age. We changed.
Well, and they say one of my favorite things to quote is, I don't know who said it or what, but one widely accepted belief is that plumbers and indoor plumbing have done more for disease prevention and control than doctors ever have.
See? That's
saving your life.
Didn't I say that earlier? Just not like
that.
that.
I was going to say it then, and then somebody cut me off.
I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. You drove that right home. I like it.
That's what I'm here for.
Mm-hmm. I must have had selective hearing.
I've noticed.
Anything else we want?
That is something that you would want to hear. What?
I haven't perfected my selective hearing.
Oh, okay. That
Sometimes
makes more
it just
sense.
kicks in all on its own.
Selective hearing, you hear what you want to hear. I just confused there.
I'm sure everyone listening is kind of confused right now.
Probably.
Anything else before we wrap up the show?
No, there's always more. We could do an episode on each little piece of this, on how to, what a liner is, what a burst is. We could go into this for days and days and days. But as a general, overall, encompassing synopsis of what's going on with your sewer line, that's what it comes down to. Is you cable it to get the water out of there, so you can find out what's going to fix it, and then let a professional that you trust help you get down the road to that solution.
Got it.
The biggest thing is, the cable is not maintaining, fixing. It's just clearing the water. If you've got to the point where you've been cabling, you've got some serious problems. I really feel like if anyone has seen and understood it the way we would, everyone would be replacing them after a certain age, just updating them before they even had problems, but yeah.
And Chasen actually said this is my last thought if we really got to end. But
I mean, we don't have to.
If we
just
have to.
I mean, we started talking about other things, and so I thought maybe that meant that we were done.
Let me tell you a little story.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys end the show.
So Chasen said this off a couple of days ago.
That actually reminds me of a story. I'm just kidding. It doesn't go.
Let's all share our stories.
Okay, Jesse's final thought.
Technological advances usually form up around our needs. Not always, but mostly, right? And so if a cable had the technology to actually fix the problems, there wouldn't be the need for liners, bursters, and better excavation equipment and better talented excavators and things like that. And so the cable serves a purpose, no doubt, but all of the advances that we've had in technology, that's the real fix. And the most cost-effective way to go.
Well, and they don't put money and effort into advancing a technology that's not needed. And the plumbing world is changing constantly. There's tons of new technology. The cameras that Matt mentioned earlier, the liners, all this technology is from tons and tons of research, development, money spent, and they do that because it's a need. It's something that we really have to have in our society to make it all function.
That's the show. Thanks so much for listening to this
episode. We are ending. We are. All right.
It's
cool.
official.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it sounded like we had a spot to end.
Oh, it was good. It was a good segue.
All right, Mike, over to you.
Yep.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of In the House. We'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe. And if you have time, go to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review for the show. We're really interested in what you think about the show. If you'd like Chasen to talk less or Matt to talk more or Matt to not even be on the show.
Matt could tell us about roofing.
If you think the analogies that Matt uses really land solidly, let us know. But if you don't relate to them, let us know that as well. I'd like to thank Matt, Chasen, Jesse for being here, Austin behind the scenes, co-producing, and everyone else behind the scenes that helps make the show possible. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, visit anyhourservices.com. But I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House. See ya.